as Dean of the Honors College. Tonight, I'm delighted to have the opportunity to recognize the work of my esteemed colleague, teacher, and friend, Jack Newell. This lecture series recognizes 6 decades of contributions by Jack Newell to higher education and to our community, and celebrates his enduring passion for an education based on the principles of the liberal arts and sciences. Teaching with Jack, which I have had the honor to do, is about engaging students as co-learners. It's about exploring the past and the present through ideas that challenge us to question our habits and to think independently, creatively, and to thrive in ambiguity. It's also about being true to oneself, and then not only respecting, but celebrating the differences among us. Ultimately, I believe Jack wants us not to take for granted our privileges, to be clear about our responsibilities to the common good, and to keep an eye open for breaches of ethics or challenges to our democratic principles. Working with Jack, you feel his steadfast commitment to inspire students to live, as he might say, consciously on this host planet, to engage with free and critical thought, to develop their individual purposes and ethics, and to feel empowered, or maybe he'd say obligated, to act on the knowledge they gain. Originally from Ohio, Jack attended Deep Springs College in California. He earned his master's degree at Duke in American history and his doctorate from Ohio State in the history and philosophy of higher education. He taught at Clemson University, Deep Springs College, and the University of New Hampshire before joining the University of Utah faculty in 1974. For 25 years, Jack served the University of Utah as a professor of higher education, and for 16 of those years as Dean of Liberal Education, what we now refer to as undergraduate studies. He also served on the founding board of directors of the Bennion Center, as editor of the Review of Higher Education, and he co-edited with Linda King Newell the scholarly journal Dialogue, a Journal of Mormon Thought in the 1980s. In 1995, Jack took a leave from the university to lead Deep Springs College, where he served as president until 2004. Upon returning to Utah as professor emeritus, he resumed teaching and, fortunately for us, began a series of courses in the Honors College. One of the characteristics of Jack that I most admire is how he lives his values by engaging the broader Utah community. He co-founded and taught in the Clemente program for low-income adults downtown, a program which now, as a partnership between Utah Humanities, the Honors College, Westminster College, and Salt Lake Community College, has versions in high schools both at East and West. The program serves as a pipeline for first-generation students to the U, as well as other institutions of higher ed. His scholarly output in his emeritus status, as best I can tell, has only picked up in pace. His latest books include The Electric Edge of Academe, The Saga of Lucien L. Nunn and Deep Springs College, published in 2015, Hope, Heart, and the Humanities, How a Free College Course is Changing Lives with Jean Chaney in 2016. And most recently, Conscience and Community, which chronicles the lives and contributions of Sterling M. McMurrin, Obert C. Tanner, and Loyal Bennion, 3 outstanding and influential scholars and leaders on this campus. That volume, published in 2019, was written with Bob Goldberg and Linda Newell. Jack has devoted his career to opening minds to new ideas and possibilities, to building vigorous learning communities, and to magnifying the human decency of others, whatever their philosophy or faith. This fellowship and lecture series allows us to extend the honors ethos of intellectual curiosity and the liberal arts education to other faculty on this campus. I would like to invite you all to take a moment with me to recognize Jack and to thank him for his many contributions to the University of Utah. And now I'm going to hand the screen over to Associate Dean Manisha Pashupati, who will introduce this year's Jack Newell Fellow.
Thank you, Sylvia. It's always an honor to introduce the Newell Fellow at their presentation. And every year when the selection committee gets together to look at our nominees' materials, we have hard decisions to make. And that's a reflection of the quantity of interesting and vital and important work happening on this campus. And in this year's selection, on the surface, it wasn't different. We had good nominees with compelling offerings. And in a typical year, we'd have spent about an hour companionable, making the cases for our individual favorites and converging on a collective choice. But this year, it seemed like the universe was pointing us all towards Dr. Moore's work with a really strong presence. So we make these selections in late March and early April. So in the spring of 2020, with nothing really happening in the world around us, as you might recall, we congregated electronically as a committee to deliberate our choices. But just prior to our meeting here in Utah, the earth moved, literally. It was a deeply stressful, uncertain, and ambiguous time for the entire world. COVID was emerging. There were shutdowns. There were mask and PPE and toilet paper shortages. And in that context, listening to the earth move seemed to compel us to choose Dr. Moore as our Newell Fellow. The idea embedded in his work of hearing the vibrations of the inanimate world and finding in it a kind of music seemed to us a reclamation of the long view of history, and a nod to the potential power of really hearing and heeding the voice of the world. So that's enough about us. And I want to also give you a few notes about Dr. Moore. Dr. Moore is a faculty member in the Department of Geology and Geophysics here at Utah. He arrived here after completing his PhD at the University of California in Berkeley and spending postdoctoral time both at Berkeley National Laboratories and in Zurich in their Department of Earth Sciences. He's a recipient of both the Outstanding Faculty Research Award and the Outstanding Faculty Teaching Award from his department. And he has a long history of actually being recognized for his speaking and his teaching. He makes time and space within his research for mentoring undergraduate and graduate students from his own department and from departments elsewhere in the institution. And in the spirit of public intellectual engagement, he's done educational outreach within the juvenile justice system, worked with artists, and briefed members of the federal and tribal governments in this country, as well as the general public, on issues around rock vibrations. And this ranges from the risks to rocks of human-induced vibrations to the risks to people from moving rocks. Dr. Moore's work has been recognized for this public importance in publications such as the New York Times and in reports from the National Science Foundation and the BBC News. The presentation itself illustrates Dr. Moore's flexibility, ingenuity, collaborative capacity, and commitment to public science, because he had the idea and worked with us to do something very special in this pandemic year. Instead of having a Zoom lecture tonight, we're going to screen for you a short film about Dr. Moore and his work, which will be followed by some comments by Dr. Moore and Q&A from the audience. And while we are watching the film, you can enter questions into that Q&A space as they occur to you. But this film, the idea for the film originated from Dr. Moore, but I also need to acknowledge our wonderful colleague, Dean Darrell Butt of the College of Mines and Earth Sciences, who supported the making of this film, as well as Bill Oakley and the students in Ad Thing in the Eccles School of Business, who teamed up with Zach Philippi, a local filmmaker, to actually make the film. And in that spirit of gratitude and collaboration, I'm going to hand the screen off to Dr. Moore, and let's watch a movie.
Well, thank you, Sylvia and Manisha. That was a really beautiful introduction, and it's quite an honor to be selected as this year's Newell Fellow. Yeah, I'll shortly just start the film, but as Manisha alluded, traditionally this would be an in-person lecture, and we're all, of course, lamenting the loss of in-person lectures. And sort of all of us were a little bit wary of doing another Zoom lecture. So I was really pleased that we could work on this film and put it together. And I hope you like it. My job now is simply to share the screen and start the movie, and we will reconvene afterwards for the Q&A. So let me just get rid of that. That should go away in a second, and I will start the film and see y'all in 24 minutes.
taking a hike to an arch called Red Arch. On the way, we're going to pass by Jeep Arch and talk about arch formation in general. My team measures the ambient vibration of natural arches as a means of structural health monitoring. Joining us today is Riley Finnegan. She's a PhD student in geophysics at the University of Utah. Riley measures the ambient vibration of arches and towers as part of her PhD work. Today she's going to be setting out 2 seismometers. On Red Arch, we're going to leave them overnight and capture how the arch vibrates through the day and through the night. Come back, collect them in the morning. So we're here at Jeep Arch, also known as Gold Bar Arch, and I brought you here because I thought it would be a good place to talk about arch formation. Arches are natural sculptures, they're erosional sculptures. They form through erosion, and when I look at Jeep Arch here, one of the things that I immediately look for is the point of initial undermining, the point where the arch initially formed. And you can see that there's probably one of these paleosol layers or a weak layer where there's more mud than sandstone running through the base of the arch. And to me, that looks like a likely place where the arch might have initially formed. From there, you start with this nascent arch, which is kind of just a hole in the fin, maybe a small thing. And then from there, it grows and grows and grows. The opening grows upwards as blocks collapse in. The opening will grow downward as well as some of the weaker material erodes away. So you have this, a life cycle to these arches. They're born, they grow, and then in case of Jeep Arch here, you can see that ultimately it's going to run out of space. It'll grow and grow and grow until there's no more fin to grow in, and it'll collapse, and that'll be the end of the arch. So it's really fun to think about, where it might be in 1,000 years, in 100 years, where it was 1,000 or 100 years ago, and then our chance intersection in this moment. To stand here and view some of these forms at really the pinnacle of their sculpture. So if we recognize that arches are erosional sculptures that have been evolving over tens of thousands of years, we have the ability to place their evolution through geologic time. But what also that really highlights for me is how sudden the rise of humans must be for an arch. For tens of thousands of years, this arch has been, trying to come to a balance with its environment, to the rainfall it gets, to the freezing it gets. Then all of a sudden, humans arrive. And all of a sudden, there's all this additional energy happening around the arch. We are on a different kind of timescale from the Earth. And so for us, this moment might not seem extreme, but for the arch, evolving over 10,000 years, all of a sudden there's humans. There's humans, walking on arches, jumping on arches. There's all of a sudden, a highway cut through here and a train passing over here. And that amounts to a really sudden change. But I think it takes a bit of a moment of reflection of geological time to appreciate how sudden that change is. This year, I've been serving as the Newell Fellow, the Jack Newell Fellow administered through the Honors College, which is a grant for faculty, a fellowship for faculty at the U, honoring the legacy of Professor Jack Newell, who dedicated 50 years of his career to multidisciplinary education, especially encouraging education across arts and sciences and humanities. So, I think this year I've tried to take that mission to heart. I worked over the last couple months to create a 4-part sound piece that contains vibration measurements from 4 different formations across the Four Corners region, which I think represent 4 distinct regions and 4 distinct issues and concerns and highlighting this region. The measurements we make here are useful from our scientific study, and I'm also trying to explore use of them for, an artistic sense, which is something new for me and something that the Newell Fellowship has sort of allowed me to muster a small bit of bravery to explore this new path. We're here at Bread Arch, and I'm super excited to be here. I love this arch. It's a beautiful arch. It's actually quite bigger than I thought it was going to be. It's got a span of a little over 100 feet, just separated on the side of the cliff, just hiding from view. Just this hidden treasure to find out here. We're rewarded with our hike by finding this hidden treasure just hanging on the side of the cliff here. And that's one of the reasons why I really love this arch. My team measures the ambient vibration of natural arches. Everything around me is constantly vibrating. For example, the wind today is really plucking this arch like a string. It's vibrating strongly, but we can't see it. We can't feel it, we can't see it, but it's constantly happening all around us. And arches, these slender rock features, happen to be really strong resonators that vibrate with a set of resonant modes. Like a guitar string would bend back and forth in different modes. That together, then that forms the sound you hear from a guitar string. Well, arches are doing the same. They're constantly vibrating at this predictable set of resonant modes. Now, we measure ambient vibration of these arches. That means just the vibration stimulated by the wind or seismic energy from the earth. And we look to then understand or measure those resonant modes, specifically the resonant frequencies of an arch. And we do this really for this concept of structural health monitoring. The idea is that the resonant properties of a freestanding structure like this arch are a function of the geometry and material properties. And the material properties are really twofold: stiffness and mass. Therefore, if you can measure the resonant frequencies reliably and with precision, you have established a way of monitoring changes in structural health over time, changes in mechanical composition of this resonating system over time. The good news is that it's relatively easy to measure the resonant modes of an arch. We, set a seismometer on the arch and we leave it there for about an hour, come back, pick it up. The data are just ambient vibration, so in the time series, we're not looking for much. What we're looking is the spectral content, the frequency content of that ambient vibration record. So this particular arch here, Bread Arch, has a first resonant mode of 4.3 hertz, and that's the arch kind of going like this. It has a second resonant mode, it's about 5.1 hertz, and that's the arch actually going like this. It has a third resonant mode where there's what we call a node point, a stationary point more in the center of the arch, and it's kind of doing a bit of a snake dance at this mode.
This is a type of seismometer. It's called a nodal geophone, and it's able to measure the vibrations. So everything around us is always vibrating. There's energy that's coming from within the earth. There's energy from on top of the earth, like wind going by, and it's causing everything around us to shake. Those vibrations are really hard to detect as humans. They're really, really small, but we have some instruments that are able to do that for us. And so we just simply place the seismometer on top of the arch, and it's able to record the vibrations. So this specifically is able to record up-down motion, forward-backward motion, and left-right motion. And so we get from this instrument, it looks like a little squiggly waveform, and we're able to use some mathematical tools to break that down, and it tells us that, as we've learned, that the arch vibrates up and down at about 4 hertz, and it vibrates a little bit like this at 5 hertz, and then there's some higher frequency modes that are kind of like a S-shaped. These seismometers are traditionally used by seismologists to measure the ground vibrations. It can tell us about earthquakes. When an earthquake happens, it can tell us about the structure beneath the earth. But we really like to use this instrument because it's quite sophisticated and it's non-invasive. So we just set it on the arch, and we don't have to cause any damage to the arch while we're studying it.
So we are able to measure the resonant modes of arches and towers alike from ambient seismic data. And this, to be clear, is a completely non-destructive, non-invasive approach. We set the seismometer on, when we're done we pick it up, and there's no permanent anchoring, no disturbance to the arch itself. Then we can come back at any time and measure them again and see if there's any change in resonant frequency. If there's a shift, then it'll tell us that something has changed mechanically in the vibrating system. For example, if the arch develops cracks within the lintel here, the span, then it would get softer. And if it gets softer with this cracking, then the resonant frequencies will drop. This concept forms the foundation of what we call structural health monitoring. Structural health monitoring is a discipline now well developed in civil and structural engineering, based on exactly what we're doing here. Repeat measurements of resonant frequencies over time.
Part of our motivation for why we want to measure the vibrations of the arches is that we look at how energy from man-made sources affect arches. And so a lot of the work I've done has looked at how helicopters and the inaudible or subaudible sound emitted from helicopters, how that can cause arches to vibrate more than they typically do. And we're also looking at trains, and so we felt the vibrations of a train go by, and we know that Corona Arch down the road vibrates 10 times more than it usually does as the train goes by. And so that might not be a big amount of vibration that causes immediate damage, but we want to know over 10 years, over 50 years, what does a train passing by do to the integrity of the arch.
So the concept of structural health monitoring applied to natural arches really serves two complementary purposes. The first is trying to keep visitors to these landscapes safe in the event of arch collapses. Now, over about a mile away in Arches National Park, a million plus people come from all over the world to view these arches, and there have been some notable collapses in the past decades. For example, part of Landscape Arch collapsed in 1993. Wall Arch collapsed entirely in 2008, and the trail in this Devil's Garden loop used to run directly underneath Wall Arch. Arch collapses occur, and I think there's a recognition that if there's going to be any scientific approach to monitoring these arches for visitor safety, it needs to be this kind of non-invasive, non-destructive approach. But the flip side of that, why we do this kind of measurement, is keeping the arches safe from people. People out here, tourists, visitors, hobbyists alike, do one of everything, it seems, in this landscape, from driving cars to high lines, climbing, hiking, all manner of tours. And some of those activities have the potential to be damaging to natural arches. So, I think around this idea of protection, conservation of these really unique and important natural landscapes is, number one, the recognition that, human impacts are felt, even in these remote areas where you might not think that. And then addressing some of these difficult questions about what these human activities do. You know, what's the impact of this rapid rise of human energy? And how can we put data on that to help understand that question? We sort of stumbled by chance on this technique of taking our ambient vibration measurements and speeding them up so that the resonant frequencies, which create a kind of vibrational fingerprint for the arch, can be heard as a sound print almost, which in turn makes a voice unique to every arch. And understanding that, you know, the hum consists of these resonant frequencies translated into the realm of human hearing. So for example, again, Barrett arch vibrates at the first two resonant frequencies of 4.3 and 5.1 hertz. These are far below the range of human hearing. If it was producing a sound, you couldn't hear it. But that doesn't mean it's not vibrating. That just means that human senses aren't equipped for that range. You know, if we speed this arch, we speed up the ambient vibration data, then we can translate those two frequency peaks, the dominant frequency peaks, into the range where we can hear them. Speed it up 100 times, they become 430 hertz, 510 hertz. Those two frequencies are basically very close to an A note and a C note. And when you speed it up, now it comes into our range of perception. And this hum or this voice of the arch becomes something that we can hear. It's a lot of fun because every arch has its own sound print, its own vibrational fingerprint, and thus its own voice. Every one is different. And we really then have the ability to hear this voice of the earth that we've never heard before. If we liken this to a voice, if we recognize this as a kind of voice of the earth that we haven't heard before, it really invites a moment to listen, and to listen to what the arch has to tell us, what the arch is feeling, how the arch is changing. The arch is in a way just constantly humming its state of health, constantly humming out. And we're just not able to hear it. So we have this technology that allows us to now experience this voice. Certainly arches are important to other cultures as well. Native American tribes in this region, historically in this region, include the Zuni, Ute, Paiute, and the Hopi. To these groups, they are sentient features. I worked in the past at Rainbow Bridge. Rainbow Bridge, if you don't know, is managed by the National Park Service, but there's a Native American Consultation Committee which consists of a number of tribes from the Four Corners region to whom Rainbow Bridge is a sacred feature. And these tribes come together to help manage the bridge in their traditional way. And they work with the Park Service. And so the tribes had posed a question to the Park Service. The Park Service contracted with me to address that question. As part of that work, we went to Rainbow Bridge and we measured the ambient vibration like we do. And we, again, translated that vibration to sound. And I had shared that with one of the park archaeologists. And she had the wherewithal to realize that this might be something also to play for the Native American Consultation Committee. And so we were, in this meeting room where I was basically reporting on our technical study. And so she played it through the speakers, and it's this big rumbling low tone. Rainbow Bridge has this beautiful set of tones that combine together really well. And she played it through the speakers in this conference room. It was about a minute, and it was a quiet moment. And I felt, proud that this was being heard in this moment. After that, one of the members of the Native American Consultation Committee spoke up, and he, without saying his words, he expressed to the group how it was an emotional moment for him to have heard that sound, that, this is a sacred feature to him and to the members of the tribes in that organization. And it was an emotional moment. And then he immediately after said, but I'm also frustrated in this moment. I'm frustrated that this is something we've been telling you all along, and you only believed it when the white scientists came and played it for you. This moment really stuck with me, of course. I mean, it showed me, number one, I was very naive coming into this. There was so much that I didn't know about Native cultures, Native perception of these arches, especially also Rainbow Bridge. So it showed me how much I have to learn. It also showed me that the sounds that we generate are not trivialities. They are things to be treated respectfully. I think looking to the future, one of the things I suspect might be the next boom commodity could be wilderness. I think, wilderness is growing increasingly rare, and that's truly wild spaces. I think that's a commodity that's going to be increasingly sought after in our, more connected, more digital, more discovered world. Even if we take a purely cynical view and just view wilderness as a commodity, then it certainly bears protection. Of course, we know it's worth far more than its monetary value. It's in many ways, essential for our human spirit to have these wild places where we can go and explore. So I think a lot of, our measurements really support this. They support this intersection of visitation and conservation. And again, I also think that this, reflects Native views. Working with the tribes in the past, especially at Rainbow Bridge, conservation is foremost. And I think there's a powerful parallel there in our goals. Our goals for these, sacred, iconic, revered landscapes is ultimately conservation.
Well, thank you all for tuning in. I really want to start by thanking Zach Philippi and his crew, and also the crew from you here with AdThing. They were really great in the field. Of course, this was a multi-day affair, and I droned on and on and on, and they had so much footage to go through. So it's really nice to see, how nicely they put it all together. Of course, they were hiking day in, day out with masks, and so yeah, really thanks to the film crew for that. And again, thanks to the Honors College and to Jack Newell for supporting this. Thanks also to Dean Butt from the College of Mines and Earth Sciences for supporting this. So I guess you know, I am here and able to take questions, and there is the Q&A field down at the bottom of the webinar, so you can insert questions directly, and I will just be able to go through them just as fast as I can. I also want to be able to share links with y'all at the end. So I'm going to just do that now while I have it here. I'm gonna make use of the chat here. You should, everybody, get a whole series of links popping up in your chat. And I wanted to be sure to share those with you where you can, you know, hear more of these arch sounds. You can hear this sound piece that I created really in the spirit of this fellowship, really for this fellowship. You can hear Red Arch directly, and some other really relevant pieces, which I will be glad to chat about. So yeah, I'll just start looking through the questions. Kiri asks, how much variability do you see in the voices of arches of different age, location, and composition? Yeah, and that's a great question. So we've surveyed potentially 30 arches and a good another 15 towers or so. And there's a tremendous amount of variability. And in general, as the resonant frequencies scale with size. The larger features have lower resonant frequencies, smaller features have higher resonant frequencies. But also we found that within like a given formation, like the Navajo sandstone, for example, that the resonant frequencies tend to scale with things like iron content, because iron, at the interfaces of grains in a sandstone can act to stiffen the rock. And so if it's a little bit stiffer than a rock without this same iron content, the resonant frequencies would be a little bit higher. Calcite cement might be another one. A feature like Castleton Tower has a bit of higher resonant frequency than we thought it might have. So there's a lot of variation. But what's really cool about it, and linking to this concept of a voice, is when you get several modes together, like Rainbow Bridge has these 8 beautiful modes that combine so well. They contain these like octave multiples of each other. And it's just this really beautiful voice. And some of them are not so beautiful. They are just these natural features. They come in beautiful forms, and they come in not so beautiful forms, and you get this whole spectrum. So each time we do a survey, come back, look at the data, and listen to that measurement. It's a lot of fun to just find out what that voice is going to be like. So Peggy asks, is there a link for others to see it, the film? There will be. This will be posted on the YouTube channel from the Honors College. So yes, look for that coming up afterwards on the YouTube channel of the Honors College. And Sylvia and Monisha, if you ever want to jump in here, I'm just kind of going to go through the Q&A boxes, but if you ever want to jump in, please feel free to do so if there's something you want to highlight. Has your research taken you to any other locations outside of Utah in the Southwest? Personally, I would love to hear from Natural Bridges in Santa Cruz. Yeah, I would too. That sounds great fun. So the answer is yes and no. We have really focused on Utah and the Four Corners region. Culturally, the features found in this region have tremendous value for spanning a range of importances, or a range of viewpoints, from native perspectives, also to tourist economy in the region. So there's a great value in these features, and I personally am so motivated to explore this region and to explore the sound print of these different features. But Riley, there you saw in the film, she has a proposal that's funded, but travel delayed our her travel, or I'm sorry, COVID delayed her travel to study an arch in Yosemite. There's actually an arch in Yosemite. It's one of the very few in the Sierra Nevada. And Riley's going to do something very similar to, you know, what we normally do here in Utah at this arch in Yosemite. So that should be a lot of fun. We're also like to start measuring some basalt towers, thinking of features in New Mexico. But I think that this concept, of course, is very broad. And you know, if there's a culturally relevant geologic landform of any type, this can be done. And you know, by hearing this voice, by experiencing it as sound, for some people, for not all people, you can get this sort of emotional connection that you might not regularly have, or it can build this new connection. So I think that it can be a really valuable way to experience some of these, you know, really culturally valuable features. Can you play Rainbow Bridge voice for us? I will not do that at the moment. I don't want to switch a bunch of screens here at the moment, but if you go on some of one of the links in the chat that I put there, the Red Rock Tones website, you can hear Rainbow Bridge. If you could, there's a comment that says, you know, your comment about recognizing data is not just discrete numbers, but something that is sacred. If you could restructure this study with what you know now, how would you integrate this concept from the start? That's a great question. And I think that, you know, one thing that comes to mind is that I would do a better view of integrating native perspectives on these features from the outset, rather than the way that it came about, which was, you know, me going in as a technical person and making these measurements, and then, you know, having the really rare and unique, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to meet and work with the tribal members with the Native American Consultation Committee at Rainbow Bridge. But I mean, I see that now as it was all backwards. You know, they should have been, you know, involved in that creation from the outset. So I think, you know, knowing what I know now about how, you know, other cultures view these sound prints, I would like to do a better job of incorporating them at the outset from studies. Yeah, I told us about wind. You told us about wind, vibration, et cetera, but what about climate change? How might increasing temperatures affect the integrity of arches? Yeah, I mean, certainly that's true, you know, increased rates of anthropogenic warming, and it goes to, you know, this like rapid changes that arches are experiencing. I will say that like our data directly don't inform that question. I mean, we do resonant frequency monitoring over long periods of time to try to figure out, you know, if an arch is degrading, but this is a long-term question and something that's going to take a lot of study. And you know, we are really interested in this, you know, vibrational energy input, and at one time I've discussed it as vibration pollution even. So, you know, certainly, you know, the anthropogenic induced climate change has a great potential to affect the, you know, structural integrity of arches. And again, it just goes back to this like really rapid change. So whenever we think about these geologic features, we have to think about this, you know, millennial time scale of evolution, and then, you know, how rapid all these changes are. And I mentioned all this anthropogenic vibration energy, but of course, there's a whole host of other effects, and one of them being changes in the atmosphere. Alan asks, what's been the most unexpected discovery from this research? I will say, you know, something quite along the lines of what you've just seen here. Well, I'm trying to, you know, separate it with maybe technical discoveries. But, you know, I think really what's been surprising is how much some people connect with hearing these sounds. And I mean, it's not like it's surprising to me. I mean, I certainly definitely connect with hearing these sounds. And certainly not everybody does, you know, the sound piece I made is 26 minutes of rumbles, and that's not for everyone. But it's been surprising, and it's been a lot of fun to get to share these sounds. You know, in 2018, Riley and I and another one of my students, Paul Geimer, we went to a STEM expo in Washington, DC, and we played sounds of Utah's arches for maybe 10,000 people. And this was a wild 3 days, exhausting, but it was so much fun to, you know, make those few connections. Those people who really lit up. That was really fun, and something I never would have anticipated coming out, you know, when I started this project. Somebody says, I'm a junior in civil and environmental engineering, interested in presentation after taking a strengths of materials class. I'm curious how much of this class you use in your research. Yeah, a lot. I mean, that's the foundation of a lot of what we do. And, you know, I think I also took that same class as a junior. And I sometimes laugh at when I crack open that textbook again, you know, certain appendices, I know where to look up, you know, moments of inertia and stuff like this. And so I sometimes laugh because, you know, we use like chapter 2 of that. We don't do anything tremendously advanced in terms of how we understand elasticity of arches. Where we are pushing things, you know, is in the strength aspect, and specifically, you know, one of the major things that Riley does in her PhD is using concepts of subcritical fracture mechanics to try to help, you know, build this framework. So, you know, she was talking about, you know, relatively small energy inputs like a truck passing by, or a helicopter tour, but the things that might happen, you know, many thousands of times in the lifetime of an arch or a tower. And so, you know, to make this a more quantitative analysis, we're using this concept of subcritical fracture mechanics to analyze things rather than just, you know, is it static? Is it, you know, does it fail or not? You know, this subcritical fracture mechanics uses crack growth rates. And so we're able to analyze crack growth rates in this. And so that's, you know, that's kind of one of the more advanced areas we're going. This project really spans disciplines of, you know, engineering, geomorphology, and seismology. So I think, you know, being able to work across those disciplines has been important. Question from Haley: what can we do to help preserve these beautiful structures? I guess, you know, Haley, there's of course no one answer for that. I think that, and, you know, also reflecting tribal perspectives in this is just treat them with respect, and whatever that might mean for the individual structure, but just, and I think, you know, sometimes hearing this voice like helps engender that sense of respect. Just in every case, you know, we need to be thinking how to best treat this landform. And so again, that can come in a lot of different forms for different environments. Are there other Lauren asks, are there other geologic features, formations that would be interesting to study in this way? Yeah, sure. Dream big, Lauren. We can, yeah. I think that there could be lots of things. Now, so, you know, we started out studying purely arches, and now we've moved on to studying towers. And in fact, behind me, you see the Valley of the Gods. This is an area, what was formerly within Bears Ears National Monument, and of course, which we hope will be restored to Bears Ears National Monument. And so, you know, we have this new focus on towers, slender rock towers. You know, this is also an area where, you know, Navajo beliefs say that these towers are frozen warriors or ancient warriors. And so I think there's a lot of interesting scientific and cultural value exploring these voices here. But I think you can look around the world and find features that, you know, you can imagine have clear vibrational patterns, and you know, where bringing forth this voice can have value for interpreting and for conservation of this feature. Could you say more about Castle Rock, Castleton Tower? Sure, I sure can. Castleton Tower is a phenomenal landform. It's you know, about 120 meters tall, Wingate sandstone, sort of freestanding feature at the edge of this, you know, big sort of triangular shaped bluff. Just a truly phenomenal landform. We did a study of that a couple of years ago, and actually we had a pair of volunteer climbers who hauled the seismometer to the top, and that's no small feat, as I'm sure you well know. You know, we there observed two dominant resonant frequencies of 0.8 hertz and 1.0 hertz. And they're basically the tower like swaying back and forth in sort of orthogonal directions. It's kind of a full height bending of the tower in these two directions. So, you know, and we have the voice of Castleton Tower for you to hear. It's actually included in this piece Bridge, which is the one that I created for, you know, for this. So you can hear it there. And Castleton Tower also provided us just a wonderful opportunity to connect with the author Terry Timkus Williams, which has just been a phenomenal and unexpected outcome of this project and producing these sounds. And Terry, if you don't know, she wrote an essay called Resonance of Stone, and we were so honored to be, you know, part of that, just interacting with her and really having her voice interpreting these sounds in the way that only she can. So if you can hear her read that essay for free. It's on Patagonia's website, and I definitely encourage you to check that out. That was one of the links that I shared in the chat field there. Most rewarding part of my job, honestly, sharing these sounds, sharing this idea with people, and again, like I said, making that connection with the few who this really is meaningful for. Summer with a musical background. Summer, one of the weird things that we did recently, and anybody can do this, you know, if we look at our Rainbow Bridge data, for example, it has all these resonant frequencies, and you can translate all these frequencies just uniformly, multiply them by 100 perhaps, and then you come up with a set of musical notes. And I'm not much of a musician at all myself, but if you arm yourself with these like 7 musical notes from Rainbow Bridge, you can then kind of challenge yourself to like make a composition out of that. And I tried to do that, and I've tried to seed that idea with others to see, you know, what could you do if I just gave you 7 or 8 musical notes from Rainbow Bridge, you know. Anybody who's interested in that can always email me, and I'll give you the notes. I don't have them on hand. Favorite arch voice and why? Oh, Barrett Arch. Barrett Arch is for sure. I mean, when the idea of, well, okay, I guess I can't say it for sure. Yeah, I should have thought about that. I guess the Barrett Arch, when it came to making this film, and you know, I had heard this sound of Barrett Arch, and I knew immediately that that's what I wanted to highlight. I knew immediately. It's so beautiful, you know, this A and C combine naturally so well. And then the other thing you heard in that Barrett Arch recording was an earthquake. This percussion, that was actually an earthquake. The other thing you heard in there was cars, trucks passing on the highway about a mile away, creating this kind of haunting voices sounds. So Barrett Arch just really has this singular voice, as I say. Yeah. Rainbow Bridge is really the other, the other one, which is just so perfect in so many ways. And so that might really be my sort of natural favorite. I skipped over a question from Jack Newell himself. Thank you, Jack, and thank you again so much for this opportunity. Has your research revealed that some well-known arches are closer to collapse than others? What are the sounds that foretell doom for these monuments? Do towers exhibit different vibrational characteristics? Towers are a little bit different. Like I mentioned, they tend to be these full height bending modes. And then you'll have a second bending mode, and third one, you have some torsional modes. Structural health monitoring as a monitoring concept is all relative. So there's not a lot of absolutes in what we do. Once we measure any one site, we can come back and measure again and search for changes in the resonant frequency. But just comparing one resonant frequency, just making one measurement alone doesn't necessarily tell us one is closer to collapse than others. So really, we're looking for changes in these resonant frequencies over time. So a big part of that is just getting out there and measuring as many of these as we can. So that's how we discovered Barrett Arch. It was a master's student of mine, Tucker Marzine, who we found this on our website, Arch Hunter's kind of website, a database, and Tucker went out there and actually found and made that first recording, and then Riley and I came out later and made our own recording. So that's a quick question or a quick answer, but I know there's, really one thing that foretells whether an arch is closer to collapse than others is its sort of just its static form. Arches shaped like with a really nice curve in this inverted catenary form are naturally more stable than arches that are flat line beams. Flat beams under gravity create tensile stresses in the bottom underside of the arch and the top corner sides of the spans. Those are naturally poor forms for rock arches, and arches that are shaped in more towards this inverted catenary form are more stable, should be more stable long-term forms. And what's great about arches, since they're these natural erosional sculptures, they can go any which way. Rainbow Bridge has evolved into this amazing form, this really very much like an analytical inverted catenary. So that's a really naturally stable form. Whereas many others, they just never get that opportunity. They're forced by some, bedding or some heterogeneities in the rock layers around them, and they never get that opportunity. So you get all types forming, and some of these are naturally more stable than others. That's a whole nother topic.
Jeff, may I jump in? It's 7 o'clock, and I know that you're willing to answer a few more questions, of course, if people want to stay on, but I just wanted to acknowledge that thank you for your work as the Jack Newell Fellow. Thank you for the film. Thank you for your time this year. It's been such a pleasure to work with you, and thank you, of course, to everyone who tuned in to this evening. And also I'll formally sort of end the evening, but then of course, folks stay on and ask more questions if you're interested for a little bit more. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sylvia. I'm sorry to all that I've been too slow getting through some of these questions. So as Sylvia mentioned, I'm happy to work through here a little bit more. Alana's written in the chat, put this in the Q&A, moving into art is so exciting given your background. Oh, geez. It's a bit terrifying for me. Can you talk a little bit of the process of making decisions, mapping the data into human audible frequencies? Yeah. Do you have anything to say about how data oralization can give us more granular distinctions than even data visualization? So, Alana, that's a nice question. Thank you. I think, the reason that we did this originally, sonifying these ambient vibrations, was to see if the ear was more sensitive at detecting changes in resonant frequencies than the eye. And normally we plot these as spectrograms, which show frequency changes over time. And we were looking for very subtle changes. And I thought, well, what if we sonified this? I know my ear is pretty sensitive at detecting changes. no, that didn't help, as it turned out. So, but that's why we came to it. You know, rather, I think what we discovered was this voice, which we had totally not anticipated, and it was actually Corona Arch was the very first one that we heard, and it's very beautiful itself. And so there's that. You know, the process of making decisions about mapping the data into human audible frequencies is a great question. And there is a certain amount of decision making that has to be done there. So, you know, when I made the Red Rock Tones website, I just made the decision, just keep it strictly the same across the board. I'm gonna speed everybody up 25 times, no changes. Therefore, there's none of my decision making in that. Everything's on a level playing field. You know, but typically I like to keep these, you know, as close to their natural tones as possible, for one. And you know, but there is a certain amount of leeway that I have only in just deciding how much I'm going to speed it up. You know, 25 times, 10 times, 4 times, or 100 times, and that really changes how you perceive it. You know, if you have a lot of, you know, a giant rock tower, a Castleton Tower, a giant arch like Rainbow Bridge, I think, you know, we naturally intuit that these should be sort of lower resonant frequencies, and it sort of feels right to me to hear these, you know, not only closer to their natural tones, but also as these, you know, powerful voices somehow. And then in addition to that, one of the big difficulties with sound, as I'm sure many here may well know, is it's difficult to share because it relies on how people, you know, what equipment people are hearing and using to hear it. So, like, you know, we shared the voice of Castleton Tower, and we were on some BBC radio program at like 4 a.m. in England, and I was just listening on my phone, and the presenter stopped and played Castleton Tower, and I'd sped it up 50 times, so it was playing 40 and 50 hertz, and my phone played zero sound. So there's a whole slew of people out there not hearing anything, and there are people, you know, listening through nice headphones, hearing this like big, powerful rumble. So this is difficult with sharing sound. There's some challenging questions in here. Michael writes, is it alive, this voice? Can it die? I mean, strictly as a geoscientist, yeah, it can die, and yeah, it will die. And I think this goes, you know, also to this concept earlier about like treating these rock landforms with respect. If we recognize that these are evolving features, and that can be strictly scientific, or, you know, as a geoscientist, I see these things, these arches, these towers are things that, you know, they're born, they evolve, and they collapse, they die. And all along the way, this voice is evolving with that. It's erosional sculptures, and the voice is evolving itself in parallel with this erosion. You know, so a feature like Castleton Tower, really, as it became more slender, it gained this clarity of tones, increasing clarity of tones. This was really fascinating to think about, because in a way that the resonant frequencies and the voice get clearer and clearer and clearer in such a case until it collapses, right up until its moment of collapse. Almost, it's gaining some kind of clarity. So yeah, they can die. They will collapse. You know, Rainbow Bridge itself might be 50,000 years old, and who knows? You know, it might have 10,000 more years, 1,000 more years, and that's it. And so, as I mentioned in the film, you know, I think we should count ourselves lucky to really have intersected these features. You know, Rainbow Bridge has been evolving for 50,000 years, and we are seeing it really at the pinnacle of its perfection. Really, truly, it is an amazing, phenomenal feature. And you know, another feature like Delicate Arch, we are seeing Delicate Arch at the pinnacle of its perfection. It's such an amazing chance feat of nature to evolve this landform through erosion. So, you know, they can die, they will die, and so we should count ourselves lucky to be here with them in this moment. So have you, or do you have plans to collaborate with musicians to create music using these sounds? Asked Chris. We're quite open. I don't want to be necessarily like a gatekeeper of these sounds. I don't, you know, they don't necessarily belong to me. So it's we always intend to be quite open. So long as people understand that, you know, these are sounds that should be treated respectfully. We had a really interesting collaboration several years ago with a Danish sound artist named Jacob Kierkegaard. And Jacob had a piece commissioned at Dartmouth's Hood Museum. And what he created was this amazing composition where he took arch vibration sounds that we had recorded, and he simply mixed them with ambient audible sounds recorded on site. So we traveled for a week with Jacob, and it was great fun. Jacob's a really nice guy and just a lot of fun to travel with. But, you know, we'd be hiking, going to an arch, and then all of a sudden he'd say, you know, now we need to stop, sit down, and don't make a sound for 15 minutes. And that was great fun, because, you know, rarely in our moments of fieldwork do we really get to do this. We're always got stuff to do. We got to keep moving. We got to do this and that. So to have this moment again and again and again and again, where Jacob really, you know, demanded of us to just sit and be silent, was so nice. It was so refreshing. But the piece he created, which is on his website, it's called Transmission. And Alana's actually pasted his name in the chat there. So if you search for his name, and then the piece is called Transmission, and there's a 12-minute excerpt of that piece on his website, and it's so lovely. It's very simply the audible sounds, you know, ambient audible sounds, you know, wind, a crow, a fly, a little stream, just ambient stuff that you normally hear. That's very real stuff in your life. And then it's the arch vibrations as this low rumbling underneath, which is equally real stuff, just stuff that we're not used to hearing. We've never heard that before. And it's just simply these two ambient pieces mixed together in this piece. And it just turned out so nice and really immersive. So if you're able, I definitely encourage you to check out Transmission by Jacob Kierkegaard, and you can hear this 12-minute excerpt. Lots of questions. Thank you all. I really appreciate these questions. Ryan asks, Warren, age 11, wants to know what the difference between a rock arch and a rock bridge is. Warren, thank you for that insightful question. Rock bridge differs from a rock arch only that it's created by water flowing underneath. And this is not a rigid distinction. Some of these arch terms are created and curated by hobbyist groups, these arch hunter hobbyist groups who have worked to kind of codify how we define things like spans and openings and heights and how you should measure it, because there's lots of, you know, not every arch is created equal. So in order to create this kind of language for describing arches. So a bridge should have water flowing underneath it or have been created by a river. But don't get too hung up on those terms. Warren, age 11. So Casper has a great question. He writes, what do the resonant frequencies you've observed for any arch tell you about the arch's response to human activity? So that's an insightful question, because it really matters, you know, the concept underlying the arch's response is whether it will resonate or not. So resonance is the condition where, you know, if you give it some energy source, the structure will respond to that. It will absorb that energy source. And when it resonates, then it will vibrate stronger. So, you know, the two things that matter here are what the structure wants to do, its natural frequencies, and then what the energy source is giving. So, you know, a helicopter is a great example. Helicopters emit infrasound, as Riley mentioned. And a two-blade helicopter emits 13 hertz infrasound. And that sound is super steady coming from the main rotor of the helicopter. It only changes by Doppler shift as the helicopter is moving. So basically, a helicopter is out there screaming infrasound, but you can't hear it because it's below the range of human hearing. Humans hear down to about 20 hertz. So, this 13 hertz energy, any feature out there that has a natural frequency that's 13 hertz or, in the range of with this Doppler shift is able to respond to that energy. And so if a helicopter buzzes over, and I like to think of this analogy, a helicopter buzzing over the Bryce Canyon Amphitheater. Bryce Canyon Amphitheater has all these towers and hoodoos, just thousands of them. And as a helicopter flies over, just a normal kind of tourist flight, all those ones which have 13 hertz resonant modes light up. They're just normally sitting around. A helicopter buzzes over, throwing out all this sound energy. And all those ones with this 13 hertz resonant modes light up. And so that's just one example. Other examples are, trains produce energy in a certain frequency band. Trucks produce energy in a certain frequency band. So features that are tuned for these frequency bands can really respond, and features that aren't tuned for those frequency bands, they will respond far less. Paul mentions, monitoring the Matterhorn. Yes, thank you, Paul. Paul Geimer, of course, PhD student behind so much of this work. And I had totally intended to mention that in the, in the question earlier, have you looked at other places all over the world? And, one of the answers is the Matterhorn. We, in 2019, we teamed up with Jan Boytel and Sammy Weber at ETH Zurich, and Jan and Sammy put a seismometer on top of the Matterhorn, and it was there for several months. And the idea was, to measure its resonant modes. And so this is work we have in progress right now. And we have all these also sound files of really this voice of the mountain, this Matterhorn. So thank you, Paul, for bringing that up. Kevin has an interesting question. Have you ever played a bridges humming back to it? I haven't, Kevin. That's a cool idea. One thing to think about there is it's very hard for us to produce sound at these low frequencies. Speakers normally can't do this, so that's a quite technical challenge. If I'm remembering right, I think Jakob Kierkegaard also had a piece where he had these metal plates, and he recorded their sort of resonant frequencies, and then he played them back to these plates in order to induce this kind of weird self-resonance. It's a cool idea. It's something I don't quite know how to explore in our work, but yeah, it's there. Alex writes, do all natural landforms have their own resonant frequencies, or is this something unique to solid rock formations with their resonant frequencies in a similar range at all? Alex, thanks so much. Alex is an honors student at the U, doing some amazing work on a cool rock tower down in Cane Creek. Yeah, Alex, I think all natural landforms to some extent do have their own resonant frequencies. I think it was partly we might be limited in our ability to detect them. These tall, slender features have very low damping ratios. That means the energy gets trapped in there, and so their ambient resonance is strong. It's easier for us to measure and detect these. Some resonant frequencies, like this mesa behind me, this formation will also have its own resonant frequencies, but they might just appear very subtle in the data and not be very detectable. So these tall slender features and long slender features, they are just booming resonators, super clear.
Hi, I'm just going to interject. Jeff, maybe you want to pick one more question, and then I need to let you come off the stage and take a deep breath.
Really
great.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I will call it right there. And if I didn't get to answer your question, I'm sorry. And feel free to reach out to me. You can find me on the internet easily. And again, the links in the chat will direct you to just a lot of other pieces that you can see. Thank you, Manisha, Sylvia, Jack. Thank you so much, and thanks everyone for attending.
Thank you. This was wonderful. Really appreciated it, and we'll look forward to seeing the video up on YouTube and beyond. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.